Hello there, Math 112 fans. This is going to be a brief video just to give you an intro to what Math 112 is all about, what we do in this course. This is a continuation of Math 111. It's a course in calculus that's for business and econ and other subjects that don't require a full discussion of calculus. So we don't go in as much depth as our 124.5.6 series. We don't do any trig, which removes a whole bunch of physics and engineering applications. But we do cover a little bit. We mostly give you the language and the ideas of calculus. So anyways, here's what we do in this course. We cover these sections of our textbook. We do foundations of derivatives. That's very similar to what you would do in a normal calculus course, but we remove everything that has to do with trig. We also remove some other challenging pieces from that related. We don't do implicit differentiation. So we do a lighter touch, but you pretty much get the full explanation with some foundations. We then discuss about applications, which you would do in any calculus class. Knowing the derivative and the slope gives you a whole bunch of things. We then add on a few more rules once we have those. And then we talk about how to go to in reverse, the antiderivatives. What if I know the rate and want to work backwards? And then we finish with a little multivariable calculus. If you were taking the regular calculus series at UW, this first part would be covered over an entire quarter with a lot more depth in examples and functions. This would also be an entire quarter, Math 125. And then this multivariable calculus, we just touch on it a little bit, partial derivatives. Basically, we think about what if you're in a business setting or economics where your company sells many products and you want to study one at a time, what effect they have on things. So we touch on Math 124, 125, 126. You get a little bit of the flavor of it. You get some of the language. Definitely if you go into economics and some of the econ models they use, go heavy into math. This might not be enough, but at least it gets you going. Along the way, we learn a lot of important graphical skills. We learn pre-calculus and algebra. That's often the hardest part. But it's all about instantaneous rates. What is the formula for the instantaneous rate or the speedometer speed of something? How can I use those to analyze various functions, whether it's revenue or demand or cost or something? How do I use those in general to analyze functions? That's the big thing. If someone gives me a function, whatever it is, x to the fourth minus 3x squared plus 10, the very first thing I would do if I was going to analyze it would be to take the derivative. And I can do it without thinking because this is such a fundamental thing. And by the end of this course, you can do that. This is the height. This is the slope. Most often we set this equal to 0 and solve, and that will tell you basically what the graph looks like. It is the fundamental tool for analyzing things. So whether or not you use that in future courses, you'll have the language. So anyways, that's what that's about. I thought I would finish this by taking a little peek at an old exam, because I feel like that's sometimes a good way to get. I'll probably go through this exam in some detail when it gets closer. It's part of what I've been doing lately is working through exams, giving study tips. But this is my winter 2018 exam, and let's just take a peek through it. So the first page, derivative rules. So we'll talk. We'll do a full accounting of derivative rules. This requires what's called the product rule. This requires just being able to rewrite, which is something I'll talk about. Sometimes that's the most challenging. And that skill, just being able to work with functions and variables and fractions, is really valuable. Assume the selling price is this, find the marginal revenue. You'll have to remember various things, that total revenue is price times quantity, so you'll have to multiply this times Q. That will do a little bit of review of our business functions if you don't know this, and then we'll take the derivative of that. That'll require what's called the quotient rule. We'll talk about that. Find the equation of the tangent line. Once again, this will require our derivative. So this first page was, do you know your derivative skills? And in doing that, we'll learn a lot more about just working with functions. So even if derivatives aren't important to you, the skills you use in working with these functions will be valuable beyond this course. Then we'll do a little bit of what are called antiderivatives or integrals. I think we've changed the content slightly this term, so we might have a little more we do here. But basically, how do we expand and go backwards? And how do we compute with that? So we'll do some of these things. One application of that is we can find this area. So this is not so much this is a business and econ thing in that there are various situations where these might represent the rate of something. One of them could be this is maybe not realistic, but one of them could be marginal revenue, one of them could be marginal cost, and this area would be some sort of change in profit, how much profit goes up or something. You'll see this functional notation. This is a skill we build up, being able to write this. Instantaneous rate. So this is more a foundational piece. That's what we'll be doing at the beginning of chapter 9. We have another demand function, market equilibrium. We do a little bit more with market equilibrium in Math 124 and 125. You often had supply and demand, and you talked about this point. But we'll talk about what these areas represent. They have a meaning in economics, and we can compute those using integrals, suppliers and consumer surplus. We'll do a little bit graphically, maybe not as much because we remove some of that content. Profit is maximized here. This area has something to do with the profit. So we'll talk a little bit about visualizing and how it relates to graphs. We'll talk about just, can you analyze functions? Where are the bumps for that function? Does it look like this? Does it look like this? Where are these things? And it starts by being able to take the derivative, which we'll learn how to do, and setting it equal to 0 and doing some solving. We'll give names for those. Here's another function where you'll do some derivatives. We'll talk about what an absolute max is. So these are just general skills everyone should know when they leave a calculus course. And then we'll talk about what happens if you have more than one variable, the derivative with respect to x or y, and how to interpret that. And we'll talk about how to maximize, if you're selling multiple products. So that's basically the course in a very brief nutshell. We do a lot of other things along the way, but you can see there were a couple pages on so-called multivariable calculus. There were, and that's the last bit of the course. There were a few pages on these integrals or antiderivatives. There's a little bit of theory. And then there were a couple of pages on derivative skills. So at the end of the term, you'll have some derivative skills, antiderivative skills, and a little bit about multivariable calculus. So you'll have built up a small collection of tools. So if you go on and have to analyze functions in an econ class or business class, or want to know how to get marginal revenue or marginal cost from total revenue or total cost, you'll have that language. Beyond that, you need to ask your major why you need this course. But I hope to also just make it interesting, since there's a lot of interesting things we will do. Okay, so that's what Math 112 is about, and there's a little peek at what the final exam might look like. All right, hope you found that interesting.